Today, I wanted to take a look at and talk about all the talent and studios that have spiraled off from ArenaNet. Now, I've been following Guild Wars 1 and Guild Wars 2 for a long time, so that means I'm more than familiar with news of various devs' departures and new initiatives being kicked up. But it's tended to be, over the years, when that's happened, I've given you guys the skinny at the time, but never really followed up on what they're doing. Well, I thought that might be kind of fun to do today. This video could seem, I feel, pretty tacky if I talk about this in the wrong way. So let me just be clear, I don't see ArenaNet itself as some has-been studio that is completely empty of all the original talents that were once upon a time there. I very much feel that ArenaNet still has a ton of talent and potential to do interesting things. Hell, the most recent forum post we got from them was from someone who'd been working there since 2004, and I know many names still linger on. Nonetheless, all this other stuff remains on my radar. I've actually learned a lot just looking through it today, and I'd love to be able to talk more about these other studios and what they're doing if there are interesting projects, especially on the MMO side, as we move forward. So let's do it. Really, I have 4 big studios to talk about here, and I think the biggest of them all is going to be the first on the list, as we'll do this chronologically. First, there's Undead Labs. So, if you guys aren't aware of this story, ArenaNet was founded by 3 people. One of them was called Jeff Strain. Jeff had been the lead programmer on World of Warcraft. He was credited at Blizzard with creating the StarCraft campaign editor, apparently had worked on Diablo and Warcraft 3. Well, in the year of 2000, he founded ArenaNet with the 2 others and made Guild Wars 1, a very particular style of game that I'm sure many of you listening to my voice right now are nostalgic about and looking forward to some kind of successor. Well, Jeff was a huge part of Guild Wars 1, but he never stayed around for Guild Wars 2. Obviously, Eye of the North's campaign was a 2008 release, so he spent about 8 years doing that. And then in 2009, before the sequel was even released, before we even saw alpha footage, Jeff and many other devs did leave to found their own thing. That was Undead Labs, and they went in a bit of a different direction. If you read a lot of the Undead Labs blog posts, as I have done today, I think it's still pretty clear that they're interested in massive MMO-ish online games, and I'll show you why I think that. But they did start out by kind of cashing in and looking at the zombie craze of the late 2000s, early 2010s. In particular, I think they were interested in making a zombie MMO at the end of the line, but they'd started with something a little bit more refined in focus and created the original State of Decay. A lot of you will have heard of State of Decay. It was a moderately successful open-world zombie survival horror game. I never really played it, but I know it was popular, and I know people were looking for more developments with State of Decay. There are actually several references to State of Decay in Guild Wars 2, which released around the same time, and the 2 studios have kind of operated in parallel to one another ever since this had initially happened. As hysterical as the gaming communities like to be about news like this, especially more contemporary events we'll get to in a second, it really does look like on the developers side, this was a very amicable, friendly experience for everyone, and the 2 studios kind of looked out for each other and talked about each other. After State of Decay, in the mid-2010s, around 2014, another one of the ArenaNet founders, this time Patrick Wyatt, also joined Undead Labs. So for you OG Guild Wars 1 fans, you have to understand that Undead Labs does have 2 of the 3 founders at it. Patrick had done a lot with ArenaNet, then transitioned into more NCSoft side stuff through the studio. He'd worked a bit on the launch of Aeon, I believe, then several other MMO-oriented things before coming to Undead Labs. When that happened, Jeff actually put a little post out on their blog post about him. He said Patrick was a programmer and designer on Blizzard's early console titles such as Rock and Roll Racing and The Lost Vikings. Great games, but ultimately mere warm-ups for his next efforts, Warcraft, Warcraft 2, and StarCraft, for which he was the principal programmer and producer. As VP of R&D for Blizzard, Pat also made major contributions to Diablo and Blizzard's Battle.net gaming framework. So yeah, the guy has some serious gaming chops. And Patrick himself put a little post out. The most interesting part to me is here where he says, "I'm happy to be working with a great team of people that I admire and respect. As it happens, more than half of them are folks I worked with for many years on Guild Wars. So I know them quite well." This is like a 2014 statement that more than half of this studio were Guild Wars devs. He says, "I can't talk about what I'm working on here at Undead Labs yet, but I specialize in developing really big multiplayer games. So I guess maybe I'll be working on something like that, at least as soon as I get one of the cool lab coats everyone around here has." It really felt like they had a lot of MMO-y ambitions. Moving forward in the timeline, they did start looking at mobile. And I know that's going to put some of you guys off, but let's hear the full story. They were making a mobile RPG called Moonrise. Now, I did not follow this. Looking back retroactively, what I can see is that it was a game with dungeons, arenas, you'd earn XP, there was loot that would drop from mobs, you could level up, and all that kind of stuff. It was also being treated as, and I'm really quoting from them here, an online experience with significant server hosting costs and an expectation for ongoing development and new content. Now, you take the idea that it's a mobile game away, everything they've said there sounds very, very MMO-y. So Moonrise seemed like more of a step towards that MMO direction. It was just on phone and was cancelled. Basically, this idea that they had these heavy costs and that they wanted to keep developing it, it really needed to hit a certain breakpoint of users, and they didn't have that. I really wish I could play a little bit of that actually now and see what they were really going for. They put a patch out for the early access areas of the game, making things really easy and smooth and streamlined, and vowed to keep the servers going until the start of 2016. But at that point, Moonrise was no more, and they went back to focusing on other things. I'll point out as well, around now, they got a bit closer, it seems, to Microsoft and signed a multi-year deal that seemed to have lots of ambitious things they wanted to do. And after Moonrise ended, they went straight back to State of Decay. I think they did a remaster of the original game, and eventually, in 2018, pretty recent, you had State of Decay 2. Again, a game I never really looked at. This was just a year after Path of Fire. Like, if you look at the two studios in tandem, it's actually Undead Labs that have done some big box product more recently than ArenaNet. So State of Decay 2, I believe, was fairly popular. They described themselves as having millions of fans, which is great, but I do believe that the game had more middling reviews and people were looking for a bit more. I think it was basically a co-op variation on what the original game felt like, and a little more than that, which I don't think met too much enthusiasm. But definitely not a failure of a game by any stretch, did not break the studio by any stretch, and they seem to want to keep building up to something else. So that brings us to the really, really recent days. Microsoft in 2018, around State of Decay 2's launch, they announced at E3 that they had straight up bought Undead Labs and acquired it into Microsoft Studios, which is now where it is. And this was a bigger part of a push from Microsoft to be getting more original and exclusives for Xbox, as they really weren't doing so well compared to Sony, who have obviously got a really nice selection of exclusives, and they wanted to catch up. So that's basically where Undead Labs is now. There was a quote from Jeff Strain himself. He said, "Very little will change in terms of day-to-day from this." He said, "I think Microsoft understands wisely that creative endeavor is largely a function of culture and passion." So we don't know what they're doing, really. They haven't announced anything further. In 2019, just last year, with the big ArenaNet layoffs, interestingly, Undead Labs once again showed their support. They put up a lovely blog post in consolation for everyone that was losing their jobs, and they offered an open house. They said, "We will do our best to coordinate with the entire Xbox Game Studios family to ensure we have broad representation of opportunity within all of our studios. We'll be ready to share more about our open positions, our product plans, our development culture with you. Dinner and parking on us." They actively sought out a lot of people who'd been laid off from ArenaNet to come in again. So you already had a good chunk of ArenaNet talent, and now they probably got more. I did find a weird Reddit post where someone says that they did expand a lot after this moment, but I can't really verify that, so take that with a grain of salt. So that leads us to the last little bit of news about Undead Labs, and it's a strange post. I'm not sure it really leads to any kind of game or anything MMO-y, unfortunately, but hey, you will at least be up to date now. It was a post here, and I'll read it in full. "Today we are excited to announce that the Undead Labs studio head and founder, Jeff Strain, is launching an exciting new initiative. As anyone who's played State of Decay knows, big ideas don't always come from the biggest cities or the flashiest neighborhoods. Sometimes the heroes come from places like Marshall's or Spencer's Mill. That's why game development needs a bigger base, where the know-how, grit, and ideas of even more people can find their way to the public. As a small-town guy himself, Jeff is dedicated to opening a new studio and a partnered broad discipline game development academy in New Orleans, Louisiana. With the support of Xbox and Microsoft, Jeff's going to continue in his role as studio head at Undead Labs, while also building opportunities to bring in people who might not otherwise consider a career in the game industry. Maybe even someone with the vision for the next State of Decay is out there, just waiting for the right opportunity. That's all we can say for now, but we'll share more information as soon as we can. So something to watch. I can't make heads or tails really of that. Are we that excited about people who wouldn't really want to be in game design being encouraged to now be in it? Kind of a suggestion there that they don't have much of a vision for their State of Decay 3. I'm not a State of Decay fan, but you would have expected that since 2018 there'd be something of a ball rolling there. So yeah, that's kind of the Undead Labs situation. That is, in my opinion, the true story of where a lot of people from ArenaNet have gone. And these two studios are kind of viewing parallel. Hell, in an alternate universe, it could have been them that I was covering for all these years. You just never know. Let's move to one of the other things that's going on. Back to 2015. Well, there was another story here shortly after Heart of Thorns, and this is one of the more prominent ones, I feel, as Guild Wars 2 had a very active and ambitious time. But right in the middle of it, the game director, this was Colin Johansson at the time, along with several other devs that had been really prominent in Guild Wars 2 development, announced that they were leaving. Now, it's always been my somewhat probably ill-informed opinion that many of the devs that left the studio at this time were more of the more competitive ilk and maybe more competitively minded. And one of the things they'd been excited about with Guild Wars 1 was its esports aspirations and its competitive PvP stuff. And what they'd been excited about with Guild Wars 2 was its esport aspirations and its competitive stuff. And it looked like Guild Wars 2 wasn't going there, and whatever project ArenaNet at that time in 2015 also had on in the background or were kicking up in the background, they weren't enthusiastic about either. That's just my speculation, based on things like the Guild Wars 2 art book talking about 1/3 of the studio at the point of Guild Wars 2's release considering themselves hardcore PvPers, and that just not really feeling like the company culture whatsoever anymore. So where did these devs go? Well, to Amazon. Amazon obviously based in the Seattle area, and Amazon had just started kicking up its own ideas to get into the space of game design. Who knows how many different projects Amazon really kicked up around now, or how far many of them got. But a few years later, they revealed 3. One was New World, which many of us in the community mistakenly believed that Colin and co had gone to, but wasn't true. One of them was Breakaway, which is now cancelled. And the third was a game called Crucible. It's funny, because Crucible has clearly been in development for a long time now, it feels. The announcement was certainly a while ago, and we had, rudimentary art about the game and some basic premises elaborated. In fact, out of everything I mention in this video, it's only really the game Crucible that we can talk about as a real product maybe us as just gaming nerds could be enthusiastic about. All the other initiatives really don't seem to have games at any kind of stage where they'd want to show the public yet. But despite the fact Crucible was announced all that time ago, what was it, 5 years, 4 years now? News on that front has been extremely quiet, and I don't doubt that probably what we on the outside perceive that game to be may be very different to what it actually is in the end. What I can say is what is on the Amazon page for it still to this day, which I have to assume is somewhat up to date, and also seems vague enough that it's probably not too out of place. It says this: Crucible is a third-person action shooter that will pit you against competitors from all over the galaxy, each with unique weapons and abilities. Your skills and choices matter. Pick out a hunter, customize their perks, and learn how to master everything the world of Crucible has to throw at you, from your fellow hunters to random events. Crucible does not strike me as a particularly MMO-y game. It strikes me as a more competitively oriented game, perhaps seeking to find some middle ground between the current era of battle royale crazes and perhaps more classical competitive shooters of the past. But again, it's now the year 2020. I'd like to see something a little bit more up to date at some point. I will note there is a bit more to this story. Last year, 2019, Amazon did announce a reshuffling and the quiet letting go of several people. A lot of jobs, I think, were lost. But when they did this, they somewhat confirmed that both the New World project and the Crucible project supposedly weren't really too affected. They might have actually been improved because of this. Like, here's the actual quote. They say, Amazon Game Studios is reorganizing some of our teams to allow us to prioritize development on New World, Crucible, and new unannounced projects we're excited to reveal in the future. So, hey, maybe those other projects are going to be interesting. We obviously know nothing, but it sounds like New World and Crucible got a little bit of a bump up from this, if anything. They say prioritizing development on them, right? Instead of who knows what plethora of other small things were happening. These moves are the result of regular business planning cycles where we align resources to match evolving long-range priorities. We're working closely with all employees affected by the changes to assist them in finding new roles within Amazon. So I'm not really sure how much ex-ArenaNet talent was affected by this, but there it is. So that's story number 2. Then we have 2 news stories, which really there's much less to talk about because they are so contemporary, but they are things to keep an eye on. And if we see compelling stuff, I could maybe keep you guys in the loop about this. First, we have Tenacious Entertainment. There's not much to say here, but one of the well-known Guild Wars 2 devs appeared on a lot of streams, did his hand in some mount design, did his hand in some skill design, and a variety of other things. I believe was working on a raid right before he left with some Wing 6 content, is Roy Cronicher. So he left with several other ArenaNet members, supposedly, and they co-founded a new studio. That was Tenacious Entertainment. They say they raised $3.3 million from friends and family and non-disclosed locations. So they have a good amount of cash there. They seem to have spent a reasonable amount of it on a pretty flashy looking website. And, well, they're making games. It is definitely more than just Roy. There do seem to be several ArenaNet members. What prompted them to leave? Maybe they just felt the time was right. I believe they're still in the same area. But what can we say? Well, they're interested in mobile development. So I get it. This might not seem so interesting. They have a very small team. And I found this quote here, where they say, we started Tenacious to shake up how things are done on mobile. As lifelong gamers ourselves, we know that players deserve outstanding innovation and memorable experiences no matter what platform they're on. That means taking concepts that are proven on PC and consoles to the next level, capturing what gives them mass market appeal with unique design made for satisfying bursts of enjoyment on phones and tablets. So maybe that appeals to some of you guys. To me, it looks kind of waffly and corporate, even if the words strung together do make some kind of sense. They do also say that the team's debut title was going to be a competitive arena combat game with exciting moment-to-moment gameplay and deep character investment. Now, that all sounds pretty vague to me, but that was in development and in 2018, and the quote I found says it was expected to launch next year. That would have been 2019, which has obviously come and gone, and we really haven't heard much. So there's that. That's Tenacious Entertainment. There's really not much more to say there. And 2019, a quick little obvious comment and nod toward the big layoff incident. Literally about 12 months ago, ArenaNet had to lay off a lot of people. I think it was 147 members of the studio were cast to the wind. Many of them were on unannounced projects we've never heard about and likely will never hear about. And many were told basically, hey, if you're really passionate about staying, please stay. If not, maybe it's time to go on. So many of them spread out. I'm not going to spend a huge amount of time on this video talking about where every individual went to. I'm more interested in like significant studios. But yeah, you've got people at Destiny now. You've got one of the ArenaNet Bens is at Minecraft now. Lily Yu, one of the long-term writers, her name's actually tagged on that big Dermond Priory map, that lore map. She wrote a novel that's due to come out later this year. There's loads of stuff, right? But in terms of studios, it was after the layoffs we come to our final story, when the final remaining of the 3 founders of ArenaNet, that's Mike O'Brien, he left. Again, with a selection of OG Guild Wars 2 devs and Guild Wars 1 devs, as well as some new faces as well. Looking at the studio, I think there's at least one person at this new place who was only working on unannounced ArenaNet stuff and not necessarily Guild Wars 2 who's here. But a new studio at this point was founded by that other CEO. This was ManaWorks. So ManaWorks have their own website, Twitter, I think, and subreddit already, but little information about what their actual ambitions with games are. I think this studio is the one more Guild Wars 1 people are interested in and wondering if they'll make games like that, but there's absolutely no reason that they must, and time will actually tell. The thing I've been most impressed with so far is actually how active their subreddit is. Several of the devs do post there regularly, facilitating discussion about skill design, lessons they felt they learned between Guild Wars 1 and Guild Wars 2, an open forum on how they might like to communicate in the future. It's genuinely really cool to see. There's a real base of users there. It's kind of mind-blowing. There have been two, in my opinion, significant updates. One of them was an image of them all at their day zero, wherever it is that they're working now. And another one was a month ago, where they said this: "We've been focused on building our company and finding the right publisher relationship. We've been doing lots of internal discussion, prototyping, and building out our base technology. During this phase, it's hard for us to tell you about what we're working on because we're talking with specific companies about how our games, plural, could fit their strategies, and it's not our place to share their strategies. Rest assured, community is important to us, and once we're a little bit more settled on what we're doing, we'll have even more to say." So that was their post, and that was just before Christmas, really. As an aside, one of the developer comments was talking about the idea of having an energy resource system in Guild Wars 1 versus Guild Wars 2, and that ultimately they felt energy is worth a lot, which is cool for me to hear, as I definitely do lament the loss of that, and I'm intrigued by the alpha footage of Guild Wars 2 where there was still sort of a half energy system in the game. What's kind of interesting though is if that's how they feel, did that somehow influence the name of the studio? ManaWorks? As in, you know, this kind of mechanic, resources, work are important, with an energy potion in the logo to boot. Is that going to be like a thrust of the kind of thing they make? I don't know. Some wild speculation there. So there you have it. I do recommend you guys check that out. And now you're kind of in the loop, all right? As far as I'm concerned, these are the big 4 places that if you're interested in what some of this talent may be doing going forwards and where to look, well, this is a good place. I quite enjoyed refreshing myself on the information. Thought it might be fun to share with you guys. Let me know whether you're really into videos like this. And until next time, guys, thanks very much for watching. Catch you next time.